Today is International Mother's Earth Day. It is a chance to reflect on how humanity has been treating our planet, and let's face it, we have been poor custodians. Tens and thousands of years of human history are crashing into the next 3 decades, and the Generation Z are the people seeing us through to a sustainable future. But how? A steady stream of IPCC report has pointed a legitimately worrying picture of the current state of the planet, but let's not lose hope. Here is why. There are more innovative ideas for serious climate action than ever around the world. People are working together on solutions to help repair the damage that's been done to our fragile home. By working in one of the three GPS fields: sustainable business, sustainable policy, and sustainable education, it reflects three underlying theories of change, and that is changing the game, changing the rules, and fundamentally changing the minds. In this series of podcasts, you can learn how to work for a sustainable future by clicking here to the three theories of change. The overarching challenge we face is meeting the needs of 8, soon to be 9, soon to be 10 billion people on this one earth, where half the folks alive are barely getting on a few dollars a day, and almost everyone wants to consume more. Where we are already fighting over water, oil, topsoil, fish, forest, biodiversity, where economic systems across the world are rooted in the legacy injustices of genocide, slavery, and colonization, and where it is getting hotter year after year after year. At the same time, there has never been a more exciting, decisive, more human time to be alive. No generation before us have had the tools, social networks, shared understandings, technologies, and business models to stabilize the climate and profoundly change the future. We can clearly see two paths, and the road to a sustainable society and a circular economy remains open. We must rewire the world with clean energy, redesign cities across the earth, reimagine the global food system, reinvent transportation, regenerate prairies, forest, and ocean. There are three pathways to sustainability. The first we discuss is the three theories of change, that is, changing the rules, using policy to attack social and environmental problems, has a well-known justification in economics. Environmental pollution and resource degradation, as well as social exploitation, are considered by economists to be negative externalities, costs that arise in the production of goods and services that are not borne by the consumer or producer. Because these costs are not embedded in the cost or price of the goods, there is no incentive to reduce them, and so firms overpollute and treat workers, suppliers, and communities unfairly. Under the traditional thinking, it is hard for any individual company to address these problems, as it would raise their cost and put them at a competitive disadvantage. To increase the overall well-being of society, government needs to step in and level the playing field, requiring all firms, for example, to reduce pollution, provide transparent product information, or prevent bribery or slave labor in the supply chains. While sustainable business has recently started to shift this paradigm, still, for many environmental and social problems, government action remains critical. In the 2000s, another front opened up for policy change, that was through business and non-profit sustainability. Over the decade, virtually every large corporation, most large non-profit educational and healthcare organizations, and many state and local governments all hired chief sustainability officers or sustainability directors. Their mission is to change the rules internal to the organization to promote sustainability goals. These businesses did not necessarily fully embrace an integrated bottom line strategy, but they were willing to experiment with sustainability initiatives within their companies. They have been aligning more or less aggressively key environmental and social goals with an underlying focus on for profit activities or non profit services. More recently, the role of the CSO has begun to shift towards influencing not only internal policy but also assisting the organizations to fully embrace an integrated mission driven sustainability strategy. It is time to change the rules in these arenas in and around government, that is, international, federal, state, and city, and in the private sector as consultants and sustainability professionals. They also work outside the system in non-profits and NGOs where they are advocating, and lobbying to change the rules in government and in business. The recent global movement that Carson's book helped spark was grounded in this economic vision of internalizing externalities. More importantly, it was a moral and spiritual fight for a healthy planet for all people and all creatures. Against a surging global human population and relentless increases in consumption, the movement has sought to build a sustainable future. From this basis, it achieved much. But from its inception, this work to change the rules has a blind spot. The leadership of the environmental movement was drawn largely from white, middle, and upper class people. Like Carson, their passion for changing the rules often arose significantly from the privilege of childhood or adolescent experience in suburban backyards and rural areas, from which grew a love for nature and the motivation to fight for it. But this narrow leadership base made it hard for the movement to ally with the environmental concerns of working class and other communities. In recent years, this unsustainable whiteness of green has begun to give way to a leadership shift, a changing policy focus, and a growing political movement based on environmental and climate justice. This new environmentalism foregrounds the fact that most of the world's population now lives in cities and that lower income communities around the world are much more likely to experience the negative impact of pollution on the front lines of industrial production, transport, and resource extraction. Similarly, these communities are often without the access to political clout, jobs, income, and healthcare to mitigate these impacts. With this new focus, engaging stakeholders impacted by policy is critical so that when the rules get changed, they benefit and do not penalize frontline low income countries and communities. At the same time, the scale and urgency of 21st century sustainability challenges, climate change and related massive rates of deforestation, access to clean water, species extinction, toxics and plastic pollution, these have rendered inadequate the 20th century goal of internalizing externalities one by one through the regulation of individual pollutants. This means that today's policy for sustainability now requires aggressively changing the rules set by governments and business to drive rapid decarbonization of the economy while simultaneously ensuring justice in the transition. This means that the millions of green jobs that are created are job opportunities for all, that everyone has access to emerging clean energy and transportation options, and the natural ecosystem services on which the whole human project depends are preserved and enhanced. Beyond changing the rules, the way through to a sustainable future requires policy change at all levels: local, state, national, UN, corporate, and in non-profit organizations and government agencies. To meet the needs of 9 to 10 billion people, we also need to change minds through education and change the game through sustainable business. Now, what kind of education is needed to be a policy leader focused on environmental justice? The programs should integrate papers like environmental or climate science, environmental and natural resource economics, environmental or climate policy and law, and communication. These subject areas are fundamental. Policy must be grounded in the best science and be cognizant of the economics, the incentives, as well as the political and legal context in which it operates, thus offering an unparalleled immersion in the kind of interdisciplinary thinking and learning critical to just policy making for a sustainable future. The Kovich Pandemic provided a powerful global lesson in ecological literacy. Everything is connected to everything. Within a period of months, a virus that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years among wild creatures spread like wildfire from one person to another to communities across every city on the planet, sickening tens of millions, shuttering business, and leaving hundreds of millions without work and income. People made tremendous sacrifices to protect their loved ones, co workers, and communities. And a century of knowledge accumulation by evolutionary cell biologists, coupled with a vast interconnected global economic infrastructure, culminated in vaccines that are now coursing through the veins of over a billion people. From from species ecology to human communities of commerce and care and science to the ecology of the human body. Everything is connected. This is the bewildering world that the K-12 students must learn to comprehend and to love. But why love? Because nature in its complexity provides the support systems for life. With 8 headed to 10 billion people on the planet, those support systems are massively threatened today. If children do not gain ecological literacy and the love of nature that flows from it, then there will be no political will to change the rules now causing ecological breakdown. Just as critically, there will be no business inspiration to change the game, now leading us, unchanged, down a deeply unsustainable path. Environmental education, sustainability education, or education for sustainable development, or climate change education is the beating heart of the theory of change. Changing the minds. For most of human history, being a good student of the environment was the difference between life and death. For hunter gatherers and later for smallholder farmers, close observation of nature was the foundation for productive foraging and hunting or a decent crop yield. The biologist Mr. Wilson has theorized that for this reason, people have evolved the capacity for an instinctive fascination with the natural world, called the love of nature. People who were close observers of the natural world, he argues, would be more likely to survive, have children, and pass along their genes. So, evolution has hardwired us with the ability to connect powerfully with the nature and gain a profound pleasure in this close interaction. But just having this capacity does not mean it is exercised. Given this, the theory of change in environmental education, climate education, is simple. Awaken students' innate biophilia. Cultivate a love of the natural world through close engagement with it. Humans no longer live as hunter-gatherers or smallholder farmers. Today, more than half of the world's population lives in cities. Everyone spends more and more time indoors and online. As most humans no longer hunt or fish or farm for a living or even for recreation, we now desperately need environmental education and environmental educators. In an age of accelerating climate change and accelerating species extinction, creating an ecologically literate population will continue to be the difference between life and death now for whole communities. Only by cultivating love and respect for nature will we build powerful political and economic movements to change the rules, change the game, and create a sustainable future. In most countries around the world, environmental education is not a significant part of the public school curriculum. Instead, that role has typically been filled by NGOs who offer in school, after school, or summer school programming, and by farms, science centers, and museums. In the US, many towns and cities have an active ecosystem of NGOs working to fill this role. Typically, these programs feature project-based learning where students are encouraged to get dirty, playing with worms or planting gardens, As students get older, these experiential learning opportunities increasingly focus around solving local sustainability challenges, recycling, or climate action. Place based learning is another hallmark of environmental education, where students integrate the natural history and ecological functioning of a place with an understanding of the social and historical context of local environmental and social issues. A variant of place based study, outdoor education often focuses on developing leadership skills and competencies through team based experience in nature. The intellectual heart of environmental education or the climate change education is the idea of ecological literacy, understanding the interactions of complex biogeochemical systems, and learning as well how human communities engage with these systems. Frontline environmental educators typically have a bachelor's degree or less. As with policy and business, environmental education is working to overcome a racist history, one that has reified the idea of experience in wilderness or pristine nature as the essence of climate change education. Solving the profound sustainability challenges of our time requires equipping young people with basic ecological literacy. Engaging with nature means learning to love and care for it. Today's students will be tomorrow's policy leaders, changing the rules, and sustainable business leaders, changing the game. Changing the game of business is core to any sustainability strategy. Why? No matter how many minds we change through education or how many rules we change through policy, at the end of the day, it will be business that has to figure out how to get sustainability done. How do we get food on the table, keep the lights on, create global universal access to healthcare, all for 9 billion people in ways that radically reduce environmental impact? We need 90% cut in all kinds of pollution soon. Global warming emissions, toxic chemical emissions, impacts on biodiversity, plastics, pollution. At the same time, business needs to reinvent itself to treat workers, communities, and suppliers with justice and with respect. Is this possible? Can business really change the game? Reimagining business in service to sustainability is a recent idea in political economy. Typically, business is seen as the problem, not the solution. Companies pollute the environment, deplete resources, and can sometimes exploit workers and communities. This pollution and exploitation are often viewed through the lens of negative externalities or external social cost. The argument goes that businesses are forced, regrettably, to impose these costs on society under the pressure of market competition. Any business that tries unilaterally to address these issues will face higher costs and be driven out of business. What is the solution? The government needs to internalize those externalities through regulation and level the playing field, allowing all companies to do the right thing. The road to a sustainable future under this theory of change runs through an intelligent and effective regulatory state. Globally, significant progress was and in places still is being made under this regulation paradigm. But in many regions of the world, including the US at the national level, political gridlock has limited regulatory solutions. Under these circumstances, sustainable business has emerged as a critical alternative pathway. The core idea is that through radical, often ecologically inspired design, companies can develop business models that both reduce pollution and promote social justice, making money while doing so. Sustainable business considers pollution and social exploitation to be technological and social design problems rather than negative externalities. Such challenges can be solved through business model innovation. Rather than facing higher cost, the sustainable business view is that companies that creatively address environmental and social problems can actually lower cost, increase revenue, and compete dirty companies. The big question is, how far can the sustainable business revolution go? Is it possible? really to solve the major environmental and social challenges of our time via radical new business models that profitably internalize what we used to think of as negative externalities. Put another way, might sustainable businesses just be nibbling at the edges of major issues at best, or at worst, simply greenwashing? The integrated bottom line is that we have to think in terms of multiple bottom lines, a triple bottom line of profit, people, and planet. For businesses taking this approach, environmental and social concerns are separate spheres. So we have to offer and think in terms of education and sustainability with a vision that how can businesses find profitable opportunities where others see environmental or social cost, provide leadership giving the vision how to get a team behind it, and execute with a vision and a team how to deliver. The fundamental role of sustainable business is to change the game, innovate new business models that radically cut pollution and that regenerate communities. However, to build a sustainable future, we also need to change the rules through policy and change minds through education. Thank you.